Hey guys, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. Today I want to have a bit of a discussion with you about negative videos, about those times that every YouTuber is going to have where they find something that is just disappointing. It's got a major problem, whether it be, a manufacturing issue, quality control, maybe the heat treat on the blade is terrible, or the edge geometry is terrible, or it's not ergonomic, whatever the case may be. There are lots of bad reviews out there that you can find. And I want to talk a little bit about making them, about how you guys respond to them, and about what that does to the sort of relationship that exists between manufacturers and YouTubers and consumers. Okay, so first thing I want to say is if you're a consumer, if you're a manufacturer and you want to get your knife in front of, a lot of different eyes and you want to do it fairly cheaply, honestly, YouTube reviewers are a great way to do that. Because now for a number of reasons. One, often they're free. Okay, often YouTube reviewers, the vast majority, are buying their own stuff and reviewing it. Right, so you don't have to spend a dime. Now there are, some cases where manufacturers are willing to send reviewers stuff to share with their audience. All right, and frankly, when it comes to advertising dollars spent, sending a free knife, you got to think whatever it costs you to make that knife and ship it, is extremely affordable compared to trying to run TV ads or buy product placement locations in a big box store or anything like that. In terms of the cost of getting your item in front of the people who you want to buy it, YouTube is an extremely good medium for that, and reviewers are, it's kind of a match made in heaven, generally speaking. Okay, now there is a problem. Now let me speak to the other side for a second. So YouTube reviewers, what are these guys like? Well, honestly, YouTube reviewers are not. YouTube knife reviewers, let's be specific, are not out there trying to make a lot of money. Okay, if you want to make a lot of money on YouTube, the worst thing you can pick is knife reviews. All right, YouTube doesn't particularly like that content, and our community is not super huge. If you want to make tons of money on YouTube, dress up like a superhero and run around like a fool, fall through a trampoline, something like that, you're good to go, right? There are lots of ways you can make good money on YouTube. Unboxing kids' toys is extremely lucrative. So do one of those things, all right? If you want to make money on YouTube, you don't review knives. So that I think for you guys as viewers, if you're watching just about any knife channel, they're doing it because they enjoy doing it. They like knives. They like talking to you guys about knives. And certainly that's the case for me. And I have to say, honestly, at this point, there's basically no money, okay, in making YouTube reviews, right? The way AdSense is these days, it is really, really diminished, to where, it's not worth it at all if you're in this for financial benefit, right? It just isn't there. So now that you've kind of got a little bit of background, there are probably some YouTubers who, are what you'd call, who you could label a sellout because they take lots of free products and they just praise them and say all kinds of good stuff. But honestly, not very many. And people, I think, are pretty savvy about that, right? I don't think you're going to fool many people if that's your approach. All right. So I've gotten that stuff out of the way, but now let's come back to this, sort of match made in heaven that we had described before. Man, I've got this knife and I think it's fantastic and I want all the people in the knife community to buy it. And so in order to promote it, I'm going to send it to knife reviewers and they're going to love it and they're going to tell everyone how awesome it is. And everything is sunshine, lollipops, and rainbows. And, it's just a beautiful thing, right? Except for those times when it's not a beautiful thing because there's some issue with this knife that, needs to be discussed and we need to talk about. So when that happens, and here's the first question I want to ask you guys as viewers. So when that happens, imagine you're me, you get this knife and it's got some glaring issue. Maybe it's a mechanical problem. It's completely unergonomic. It's a 7-inch knife that weighs 10 ounces. There's just some glaring issue. What do you think? What would you do in that situation? All right. Would you, make a video and rant and rave about it? Would you, try to sort of gloss over it and say, well, I did pay good money for this, and there's some things I kind of like about it, so let's try to balance this out. How would you approach that? In a couple minutes, I'm going to tell you how I approach it, and I'd love to hear some of you other YouTubers talk about how you approach that situation. But the reality is, it's going to happen, right? There's no YouTuber out there that I know of that has, never had a bad review, where every single thing they've gotten has just been totally, totally awesome, right? Even the ones that you may suspect are on the take, you'll find some bad reviews from them. And so maybe that brings that into question just a little bit. But the question becomes, what are you going to do in that situation? Right? And you have to know that if you make that negative video, there's going to be some ramification. One, you're going to get viewers who don't like it. All right. Oftentimes, and I still get lots of messages. I've made plenty of bad reviews, and I get lots of messages from people. They watch my video and they go, you're the biggest idiot who ever lived. I have this XYZ knife, and it is the greatest knife that has ever been made. And, it costs only $50, but it's better than any custom knife that's ever been ever in existence. I'd throw all the ZTs in the garbage and just buy this and blah, blah, blah. They get mad at you for criticizing their favorite folding knife. And hey, that's great. I love the criticism. I'm happy to hear it. You're not going to change my mind, okay? But, maybe you will, but don't hold your breath. Anyway, you're going to get some negative feedback, certainly from viewers who have that knife. And that's why a lot of people who watch my videos already have the knife in question. They just want to hear someone discuss their knife and see how much somebody else loves it as well, okay? So you certainly get a fair bit of that happening. Now, you're also going to have the company weigh in, all right? And you may have noticed on some of my reviews, whoops, as I knock the table over, you may have noticed on some of my reviews, a particular designer or maker will weigh in and say, hey, this is what I was thinking about this, or this problem that you addressed, this is how that came about, or whatever the case may be. Or you should look for my next item that's not going to have that problem that you just described, okay? And that's happened to me plenty of times as well, and I'm sure you guys are aware, and you've seen that happen on other channels also. All right, sometimes you're going to get a company that's really mad. I've got some pretty negative messages before, right? You don't know what you're talking about. This is why we did it this way, and that's fine too. And now I will say this: if it is actually something I've gotten wrong, which happens, okay. Then I will always make another video and say, hey, I got this wrong. This needs to be corrected. And I'll put it right in the description box. I may even add an annotation to the previous video. And I've done that on a number of occasions for knives that, I got something wrong. I described the steel as the wrong steel. Can't remember doing that ever, but, I described some mechanical aspect in a way that was inaccurate. And so certainly me and every YouTuber that I know of is certainly willing to correct something that's problematic. But you're going to get some negative feedback. You're going to get some positive feedback as well. Then you need to, and so you got to try to weigh that. Now, the other thing is, if you're a huge YouTuber, I'm not that big, honestly. I'm getting close to 8,000 subscribers, and I hope to hit 10,000 in the not too distant future. But that's like really, really small potatoes, okay? Really small. And so I don't have that much impact. But there are certainly guys who are much bigger than me who can have a huge impact. And I'm sure they, and if one of you are watching, you need to weigh that. And even I, with my limited amount of influence, need to weigh what I'm saying and make sure that I'm not overstating something or being unfair, because people will hear it and they'll draw certain conclusions. Okay, so what can I do? What do I do as I'm making some of these videos? And I'd love to hear, what do you guys look for in a negative review? Okay, are you suspecting that we're being unfair? Are you more inclined to believe the bad stuff than the good stuff? And actually, let's touch on that point right now. There is such a thing as negative bias or negativity bias, where people are more inclined to pay attention to bad stuff than good stuff. All right, ask people who produce news programs why they choose the stories they do. And it's because they know that, the human brain is kind of hardwired to pick up on the bad stuff, right? Which makes sense from a survival perspective, but doesn't always make sense from one, a mental health perspective, and two, a fairness and an unbiased perspective. So this little point is that, and I'm surprised someone hasn't done this, but if you make a lot of negative reviews, those reviews can get a lot of attention because people tend to like drama. It's sort of like the schoolyard fight. When there was going to be a fight, everyone in the whole school goes to check out what's going on. Well, you can create a lot of drama by, making nothing but bad reviews. And I'm a little surprised that a YouTube channel hasn't started that just does that does nothing but negativity and just, tears down every single knife and every single knife maker, because that would get some attention. And if you're watching this and you want to do that idea, have at it. I'm not going to do it. There's going to be some real struggles associated with that, but I bet you would get some decent views. Anyway, so that's number one. Number two, you need to understand the potential impact. Okay, now let's get into the things that I do. Here's number one. So when I'm going to make a bad review, when I'm feeling like this knife kind of sucks, number one, I try not to get too emotional. Or if I am too emotional, I'll wait and make the review next week or the week after when I don't feel quite as strongly about it. And I think that's an important consideration that others may want to use as well. Emotion has an important place in the world and in our interactions and our decision-making process, but right, we've got to make sure that as reviewers, we try to maintain a certain level of objectivity, and you really need to check your emotions at the door if you're going to do a good YouTube review, a valid, trustworthy one that's going to be really helpful to people. So try not to be too emotional, even though, just like everyone else, if a YouTuber gets a piece of junk product, they're disappointed and they're frustrated and all of those things. So you need to try to check that at the door. Number two, try to understand the potential impact. Some people may not buy this. I've had people say to me, hey, if you don't like a knife, there's no way I'm buying it. Or I wait for your recommendation to buy a particular knife. And I'll have people email me, hey, Kevin, you haven't reviewed this knife. Can you get one and check it out so that I can decide whether or not I should spend my money on it? And sometimes I can. A lot of times in that case, if it's already on my list, I may go ahead and buy one, or I may say to the person, hey, I'm going to buy one, just hold off. Or I may send an email to the company and say, hey, I've got people asking me if I would check out this knife. Would you mind sending me one? And sometimes they will. So you need to keep in mind the impact that you can have. And that's an important thing, especially for larger guys. Number three, okay, so number one, don't get too emotional. Number two, think about the consequences of whatever you're going to say. Number three, make sure your expectations are realistic, okay? And there are a number of important factors within that, okay? Who is this knife designed for? Maybe it's not designed for me, and that's why I don't like it, okay? Maybe it's designed for, the non-knife guy that we talked about when I did my Knife Guys Never video. There are lots of non-knife people that just want to carry a pocket knife around, and for those people, there are a lot of considerations that I feel are very important that they are just not going to care about, right? They don't care probably, if you ask the average person who carries a pocket knife what blade steel their knife had, they have no idea and they don't care, okay? And as long as it doesn't go dull, by cutting through one hot dog, they're not even going to know about blade edge retention, all right? As long as it doesn't get rusty with one use, again, they're not going to care about corrosion resistance. So I've got to think about, who is this knife designed for? Is it designed for me, the knife enthusiast, or is it designed for the regular person? Now, sometimes that creates a bit of a dichotomy, and certainly in the knife community, you see that a lot. Frankly, the general public loves assisted knives. They love assisted knives, and I don't really hate them. This is the Kershaw Speed Safe, and Kershaw gets a lot of flack over the Speed Safe. I actually like Speed Safe. I find it fires pretty well, and I love the fact that I can close the blade halfway before I have to think about it. I think it's a really, really good way, and if I'm going to go with an assisted knife, Speed Safe is, in my mind, one of the better options. Although I know a lot of you guys disagree with that. You just hate assisted knives. Well, you've got to keep in mind that there's no way Kershaw is ever going to make that favorite model of yours de-assisted, right? It wouldn't make any sense to them because the vast majority of the general public, the non-knife guys, they love it. And they're selling way more knives to them than they are to us, okay? And so we've got to keep that in our mind. So we've got to modify our expectations in some cases to be realistic and understand that a company does not exist to make knives for the knife community. They exist to make money. And that means they've got to sell hundreds of thousands of units, not, the 40,000 members that Blade Forums has. They need to sell way more than that, okay? Now, that means I've got to think carefully about who is this knife for and is it meeting their needs or not, all right? And most of all, and perhaps, and most importantly, I need to be honest, right? I've got to share with you guys what's really going on. I don't want to hide anything. I don't want to soft pedal anything. In general, I just want to be not overly negative, not overly positive, because there are knives that I love, even though it has an issue here or there. And what I try to do is say, I love this knife, but here's the issues it has, okay? Or I hate this knife, but here's the good things it has. All right, so that's something I really, really try hard to do. And honestly, you guys are pretty good at keeping most reviewers honest, okay? If we get something messed up, we're going to hear about it down in the comments. It may even travel elsewhere. I've seen YouTubers sort of have discussion videos back and forth about something they disagree on. That could be a fun thing to do anyway. All right. The last point that I want to raise here is that there can be a certain amount of resentment toward knife reviewers. One from the knife community, because there are people who have tons of knives, they spend way more money on knives than me, and they kind of go, who do you think you are to tell me what knife I should or shouldn't like? And frankly, I'm nobody, right? You don't have to listen to me. I just like knives and I like talking about them. So listen or don't listen, I don't really care. But I'm just a person who enjoys knives. And so, maybe your opinion is much more valid than mine is. Although, my experience has been that most of those people who disagree with me to the largest degree, disagree the loudest, have the least informative stuff to say. All right. Now, that's not always the case, and I've certainly been proven wrong on many an occasion. But there can be a certain amount of resentment toward reviewers from the knife community, but also toward knife companies. A knife company who says, hey, I worked really hard on this, I think it's really good, but now you reviewers are crapping all over it. Forget you guys, right? We hate you guys. And certainly some companies have gotten to that point. There are some companies who, they don't think much of knife reviewers. And I, probably, if you want to talk about that in the comments, we can do it. I'm not going to go out on a limb and say it here, but certainly there are companies, I've made bad reviews, and I've shared opinions about companies. I'm sure that, to give some basic examples, I'm sure Gerber, SOG, these guys are probably not loving most knife reviewers out there because, and again, they're the companies that are making knives for the general public, not for knife enthusiasts. And so you get that. And some knife makers, okay, and some knife manufacturers feel unjustly treated, unfairly treated by reviewers. They just don't like me and And I always think, well, how did they get to not like you, right? They don't know you from Adam until they started getting your products and started to figure out, hey, there seems to be a problem here. Anyway, that's the last point I want to make, and I'd love to hear your thoughts below. Am I reading into that situation? Am I completely out of my mind when I say there's a certain amount of resentment out there toward knife reviewers? Or do you think that's kind of legit? And if you'd like to tell me why you feel that can be a thing, I'd love to hear that below as well. Thanks for watching. I know this has been a long video, but there's quite a bit to kind of go into our discussion here. I'd love to carry on that discussion down in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't forget to hit the notification button since subscriptions don't mean as much on YouTube anymore. That's all I got for you. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you soon.